What if the person that you've been trying so hard to become is actually the one that is holding you back? Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm a spiritual mentor, and I want to get down to the really basics of why a lot of people stay stuck, even when they have huge dreams, and even when they have these beautiful visions of how their purpose is going to turn out. Why do they still remain stuck? Well, today we're going to get into one of those main reasons, which is the collapse of the old self or the collapse of the old identity, the version of you that you once thought you were, and also the version of you that you once thought you were becoming. So, most of us have this ideal version of ourselves in our head. When we're talking to people in public, we think about how we're behaving and how that kind of measures up to that perfect version of ourselves. Maybe when we're doing chores at home, we think, what's the perfect amount of work I could have done on my house? And then how we show up in our job or career or business, we think, okay, this is the ideal, this is okay, and then this would not be so okay if I showed up in this way. Well, what if I told you that this way of treating your life is actually one of the main things that signifies that someone is actually stuck in the place that they're in? So I want to get into why exactly this is so correlated and why I see it in almost every single one of my clients that's in a phase where they're stuck. They also have this really strong version of their ideal, and they never seem to be living up to it. So let's get into it. One of the reasons that I believe this happens is because when we get into a more fearful state, we get out of flow state. And in that fearful state, our highest desire is usually control. We want to have control over the outcome. So what do? We build this complex map of how to be as a person, and we try our best to follow it. But as you know, we never really do that well. And even when we do follow it perfectly, is it really what you dreamed of? Or is it kind of this stressful version of what you dreamed of? For me, whenever I'm hitting the mark perfectly and doing everything right, things do start to work a little bit better. I'm not going to lie on the outside. But usually my inner world gets more self-abusive. I get more uncomfortable with myself. And I also get more judgmental of other people when I'm in these states of consciousness. The first step that I go through when I work with a client is simply getting them to accept that their old self is going through a collapse. They're going through what some people may call an ego death, where a version of you that you thought you were is ceasing to exist. And certain skills and habits and traits that you had are also ceasing to exist. But what's coming up from beneath that is actually a much more authentic, much more genuine version of you. A lot of people during this phase will start to feel like they are being fake. They'll still be acting almost the same as they were a couple months ago, but for some reason, it feels fake to them now. And this is actually not a bad thing. This just means you're becoming more aware of how you're showing up in the world and also more aware of who you actually are. The next phase after you start to feel really fake is you'll start to have things go downhill when you never expected them to go downhill. So for example, you will be working on something that worked every single time in the past, and for whatever reason, this time it's just going to malfunction in some way, or someone's going to back out last moment. Something is just going to go wrong in what you're doing in a way that is almost magically impossible, but it still goes wrong. And this also is often seen by people as a really bad sign. Like, what bad karma did I entertain in order for this to happen? But a lot of the time, it's a good thing. It's just the dissolving and the breaking apart of the false reality that you constructed and the reanimating of what is true to you, and then the reflecting of what is true to you back to you. But in the interim, you actually have to deal with all of that feedback that comes up as you let go of the old self. But this phase of dissolving is actually so essential because it clears out the room and the space for all of the amazing blessings that are on their way to you. And I really want you to remember this is a sacred process of purification. This is a process that your ancestors have gone through. This is a process that humans are naturally part of. It's a rhythm of nature, which is to create and to destroy. We build up a sense of ourself, and then that sense of ourself is destroyed. And then we build up a new one that is realer, more authentic, more true to us. So getting in touch with the sacredness of this process, I think makes it really easy and makes it even fun. It's a very divine process when you really tap in with it. So although it may be uncomfortable, I want you to embrace the sacredness of this process. After you go through the phase where you have the collapse and things in your life start to dissolve and go away from you, and you kind of get left with this empty space. And this is what we might call the void. A lot of people, when they get to the stage of the void, they get really scared and they just start trying to fill it up with anything that they can. They try to fill it up with activities to keep them occupied. They try to think and figure out everything in existence so that they don't have to sit with the void. They start aggressively pushing forward, or they aggressively numb themselves with Netflix and other bad habits that keep them out of alignment. But the best thing that you can do in this phase is actually just sit with it. And that can be really difficult because the void is really scary to the ego and to even parts of our inner child that are used to making a lot of noise and taking a lot of action. So as you adjust to this phase, it's kind of like adjusting to being out in the cold. You can really handle a lot of cold, but in the beginning, you're going to shiver. And if you go right back inside or find a blanket, you're not going to get adjusted. And I know it can be really tough to be out in that discomfort, but that void is the place where you generate the space. While you're in this void phase, it's okay if you feel kind of lonely or isolated. It's okay if you're in hermit mode. It's okay if you feel like life isn't as meaningful as it was before. This is just what the space feels like. It's not full of this sparkling, dancing love that a lot of things in life are. But the space is actually the thing that allows all of those amazing essences in existence to exist. It's the canvas. It's the canvas. It's the space where life happens. So don't be out here disrespecting the space where life happens by projecting a lot of fear and a lot of dissatisfaction onto it. And now I want to share with you 3 tips that are going to make this process of letting go of your old identity and letting go of who you thought you should be a lot easier. The first step, it's kind of weird, but you kind of got to grieve your older self. So you have to grieve this version of you that had a certain sense of humor and certain characteristics and liked certain things and disliked certain things and behaved in a certain way. You almost have to grieve that version of you that is ceasing to exist. And sometimes you might even cry for this older version of yourself. So you can go through little routines. Some people host like a mini funeral for this version of themselves. I like to kind of journal about it and sit with myself. And sometimes I have cried about older versions of myself that I'm letting go of. But an easy thing to do is just to sit down, hold your hand over your heart, and just say, I'm ready to grieve the version of myself that I'm letting go of. What version of me am I ready to let go of? The next one, which we kind of already got into, which is just sit into the void and don't try to fix it. You don't need everything to go so perfectly every single day. A lot of times, things are going to go wrong for you, and that's actually going to shape you into the being that you need to be for things to go exponentially right for you in the future. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be productive. You don't need to be perfect. You can give yourself space to collapse into the void and to become a new metamorphosized version of you. And finally, these lessons in life move in spirals. So you might be learning the same lesson that you learned 5 years ago, and you're thinking to yourself, why didn't I already solve this? I thought I patched this up years ago. Why am I going through this again? Life moves in spirals, and we actually go through the same lessons over and over again, months or even years apart, so that we can deepen our level of understanding of that lesson. So understand that as your old identity collapses, you're probably going to encounter similar problems that you have already conquered in your past, but now you just need to learn them to an even more expansive or an even deeper degree. So these 3 tips are: let yourself grieve the old version of yourself, let yourself sit in the void, and take time to integrate all of the lessons that are coming up, even if it's something that you feel like you already conquered in a different phase of your life. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to book a free 30-minute Zoom call with me, then go in the description and you can book one for later this week. I'd love to get on a call and chat with you. If not, totally cool as well. We also have a community called the Circle of Wisdom where you can get on free coaching Zoom calls with a bunch of different awesome mentors and connect with a spiritual community. So I highly suggest you check all that out. Thank you so much for watching today. It was a pleasure, and I'll see you next time.